book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I am here to go through my mid-month wrap-up for the month of September. I feel like this month is flying by just like every other month in the year. So we have already passed the halfway mark. Today is the 16th, and I will be going through all the books that I have read so far and then let you know what I'm currently working on and what I still need to or want to get through by the end of this month. So far this month, I have read a total of 9 books. 3 of those are from the same series. So I will start out this video by reviewing those 3 together, and then we'll continue on with the rest of the books I read. So last weekend, there was another round of Squash That series. This was a relatively short round. It was a 24 and 48 hour round, and I did vlog that experience, and that vlog should be up already, so I will go ahead and link that up above. I read 2 volumes of A Perfect World during that readathon, but earlier in the month I also read volume 3. So I read volume 3, 4, and 5 this month, so I will go ahead and just review all 3 of them together since I don't have too many thoughts about the individual volumes. So this is written by Ree Aruga. This follows a couple who knew each other back in high school and then are reacquainted through their work partnership, and she used to have a crush on him and decides that she would like to start a relationship with him in the present. However, since she last saw him, he has been in an accident that caused a spinal cord injury, and he is now in a wheelchair. Volumes 3 and 4, I ended up only giving 3 stars, but volume 5, I ended up giving 4 stars. I have a feeling that with this series, there's probably going to be a lot of ups and downs when it comes to my ratings, and it all kind of depends on how exciting I find what is currently happening in the story. And in volumes 3 and 4, they were going through a rocky patch with their relationship, so they weren't spending a lot of time together, and I didn't really enjoy that because I was reading the books so that I could see them be together and work on having a relationship, despite the fact that there are unfortunately a lot of people who are trying to interfere with that. This series is very upfront and honest about what it's like to have a disability, as well as what it's like to be in a relationship with someone who has a disability. I think I've stated this in the past. I myself am obviously not an own voice reviewer, and I'm not sure about the author and their status. I usually don't do too much research about the author, and just the basic research that I didn't come up with anything. But of course, I don't know if the author has someone in their life who has a disability, or if they have like a own voices reviewer, sensitivity reviewer who looks through these books before they're published. But my personal opinion, just based off what I know about disability, is that the author is doing a relatively good job of portraying it. One of the other things that I enjoy in this book, aside from the fact that I do think that their relationship is very sweet, is that they do show other couples who also have disabilities, and so you get multiple points of view of different disabilities. All these people are in wheelchairs, however, different wheelchair users have different experiences. As with all disabilities, we can't assume one person's experience represents all disabled people's experience. So I do like the fact that the author is bringing in other characters who are also using wheelchairs, but they bring a little bit of a different viewpoint to the story. So I do think that this is a good series, especially if you're looking for disability representation. I would say that you want to be someone who enjoys contemporary manga. I'm relatively new to it, and I'm finding that I do think it's slightly on the boring side, which is why I'm struggling with it a little bit. But at the same time, I really do enjoy this couple and am very excited to watch their relationship grow. Up next, I finished an audiobook, and that is White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a YA kind of paranormal horror thriller story, and we are following Marigold. Marigold and her family have moved to a new up and coming town. Her mother has kind of won a lottery to have the opportunity to live in this community pretty much rent free while working for the company that is trying to revive this town. Marigold and her brother and her mother are African American, and her mother has remarried a white man with a young white daughter. So all five of them are moving to this new community, partially because Marigold is recovering from a drug addiction. She was found overdosing, and her parents had, I believe, sent her to rehab for a while, and they're just kind of trying to do a change of scenery to help with her addiction. Now, it seems like her addiction primarily stems around marijuana, but she had obviously escalated to harder drugs. This has a lot to do with the fact that she has a deep-seated fear and paranoia revolving around bed bugs. Apparently her family had an experience with bed bugs, and luckily I have never experienced them, and after reading this book I never do, but it seems to be one of those situations where once they're in their house, you gotta move out kind of situation. You gotta burn all your stuff, you gotta scrub your skin, and this has really negatively impacted her life. As soon as they move into the neighborhood, they realize that the neighbors are a little bit strange. They kind of seem to watch them without saying anything, and the majority of the houses in the neighborhood seem to be run down and empty. So they're kind of like the first family there for this project. Marigold also starts to realize that there is some weird things happening in the house, but she seems kind of reluctant to tell people because they will associate it with her possibly being on drugs again, or to her anxiety and paranoia. Things start to escalate, and her brother starts to get involved as well, and they start to hear some concerning tales from the neighbors revolving around their house. I ended up giving this story 3.5 stars. And the lower rating has a lot to do with the ending. For the majority of the book, I read this or listened to it in one day. I really didn't want to put it down. I got off work and was like, I'm going for a walk so that I can keep listening to it. So I really was having a great time listening to the story. I thought that it was really eerie. It definitely gave me those creepy haunted house vibes. It also had some slight Get Out vibes because this company that's trying to revive the neighborhood was definitely trying to gentrify, and were not making it better for the current residents that were there. In fact, they were partially responsible for a lot of the residents currently being in the correctional facility. So there was definitely a lot of weird things going on that I was really invested in. The problem was the ending was so sudden that it almost gave me a bit of whiplash. Like, the story ended and I actually looked up to see if maybe there was a second book coming or something, but it left so many things unresolved, and it literally was just like the end. And I was like, what about all the creepy stuff happening with the company? And what about the person that got away? And there was like all these unanswered questions. So I think if you're someone who kind of wants a completed story that doesn't have an open ending, this might not be the book for you. But I will say 90% of the book is excellent. It's just that ending was terrible. I hated it. Up next, I read Eden by Lily Mayne. This is the second book in her Monstrous series. This is a series that happens in post-apocalyptic America. At least so far, all the books have been set in America. Pretty much about 20 years ago, a rift in the universe occurred and allowed monsters or different creatures from another world to enter our world. And a lot of these monsters are very scary looking, so the military decided to bomb the crap out of them, which included bombing the crap out of their own land. And so at this point, we are in a society where most people are either living in military controlled cities where there's a lot of poverty and disease and unemployment. There's also military bases as well as raider camps. And the raiders are the ones that tend to live out in the wasteland where the monsters roam. In this book, we are following Eden, who is one of the monsters, as well as Danny, who has been a soldier for 12 years. Correction, the love interest or the main character of this book is Hunter. Danny is the character in the first book. So apologies. Hunter and Eden are in this book. At the beginning of the story, we are following Hunter and his friend Charlie as they stumble across a military base that has been destroyed. So they kind of set out to find the next closest military base so that they can report after their most recent mission. However, while they are walking out in the wastes, they end up running into a group of monsters who kidnap Charlie, and Hunter falls into a hole. So Hunter is in this hole. He's like, oh my God, I'm gonna die in this hole because it's very deep and I'm holding on by like a pipe and it's gonna break. And then Eden kind of like pops up and he's like, do you need help? And Hunter's like, what do you think? Yeah, I need help. And Eden's like, I don't know anything about humans. Maybe you like hanging out in holes. Anyway, Eden saves Hunter from this sinkhole. And then Hunter asks if he happens to know where those monsters would take his friend Charlie. Seems that these monsters luckily are not into eating humans, but they are into sacrificing them to their god. So then the two of them set out to follow this pack of monsters to see where they're bringing Charlie and to see if they can rescue him. Obviously, as they spend more time together, they start to get closer and form a relationship. This is a male-male monster romance, so you're obviously gonna get those sexy vibes. I will say that there were parts of this book that I liked more than Soul Eater, and then there were parts that I liked less. So I ended up giving this a 4.5-star rating. Soul Eater, which is the first book in the series, was a 5-star read. Things I liked better in this book is that the world expanded quite a lot. There was a lot more world building. We got introduced to a lot more monsters. There was an introduction to a place that I'm not going to talk about because it would be spoilery, but it was a very interesting place that I think is going to definitely play into some of the other books, at least one of the others, because there seemed to be someone there where I was like, are you going to have your own book? Because if so, I'm interested in reading it. So the world building and just learning more about the wastelands and learning more about different monsters and things like that was a great time. We also got to meet up with Win and Danny, and I love them, so I'm glad that we got to see them again in this book. However, while I did enjoy the relationship, I didn't quite like it as much as Win and Danny's relationship. Hunter spends a good chunk of this book in a pissy mood. He's upset. He fell into a hole. His friend got kidnapped. You know, he's just kind of being an asshole to Eden for a good chunk of this book, and it feels a lot like he's using Eden just to get to Charlie, and he doesn't care that much that Eden might get hurt. He's like, he's a big strong monster, he can handle it. But as the story gets on, he starts to care more about Eden and starts to realize that Eden very much can get hurt and he very much doesn't want him to get hurt. So it just takes a little bit longer for this relationship to develop than in the first one. But once it gets started, I had a great time with it, but just didn't love them as much as Win and Danny. But Win and Danny were a great couple. They're really hard to top. And I am still very excited to continue reading more in the series. All right, up next we have another book that is in that Squash That series vlog, and that is the second novella in the Loath to Love You collection. I read Stuck With You by Ali Hazelwood. This is a STEM novella where we are following, I don't remember the characters' names. I'm sorry, I don't. But we are following a civil engineer and she gets stuck in an elevator with her nemesis, her very tall, large nemesis in a very small elevator. Anyway, this story kind of follows their time in the elevator as well as before, kind of covering how their relationship started and how it fell apart. I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars. That's the same that I gave to Under One Roof. 3.5, I feel, for a novella is a pretty good rating. I'm not a novella girly. This book did not start out well for me. The author assaulted us with descriptions of this man's grandeur. It for like 20 to 30 pages, it was just focusing on how large this guy was. And I was like, if you compare this man to a mountain one more time, I'm gonna close this book and I ain't picking it up anymore. But luckily, she chilled out a little bit, and then the remainder of the book was quite fun. I had a good time. I have to admit, with Ali Hazelwood, I don't always do too well with her sex scenes. I don't know if it's the size difference. Unless it's a monster romance, the idea of some 5-foot woman with a man that's almost 7 feet tall, or however tall this guy is, freaks me out a little bit. So yeah, you know, you kind of have to suspend your disbelief for the fact that this teeny tiny woman can take this ginormous man. But still, I think it was a fun time. It was your classic Ali Hazelwood. If you like her stuff, you'll enjoy this one as well. All right, and up next, this is a book I talked a little bit about in that vlog, but I didn't finish it, and that is Have an Official Blessing, Volume 3 by Mo Xiong-tong Shiyu. And obviously this is the third book in a series. We are following Shilong, and he is a man who ascended to godhood at one point and then fell from godhood and then ascended and then fell and has now ascended for the third time. He also has a companion, Songlong. I feel like last time I was talking about this, I put his name in the wrong order, and his name isn't on the back, which is very unuseful. But anyway, Songlong, or maybe I can find it in the book. He goes by Hao Cheng here. He has like 4 different names. Anyway, I'm gonna call him Songlong. His companion, Songlong, who happens to be an incredibly dangerous ghost king who is quite smitten with Shilong. So this is a queer, slow burn romance. At this point, I feel like things are picking up a little bit. There may have been a little semi-kiss situation. This book in the first half focuses on Shilong's past, his time as a prince, and his first ascension to godhood and what caused his initial fall. I did really enjoy that aspect of it. I thought that the war, the plague, the reaction of people towards him, the expectation that people have for gods, and how those expectations grow and grow and grow until they start to hate the god if they cannot fulfill all of their needs, was definitely an interesting and frustrating thing to watch. The second half of the book does go back to present time when we're dealing with Shilong during his third ascent. I will say and I always say this, that the way that these stories are broken up is a little bit awkward. This is initially a online story, so they just posted new chapters and it just has like a flow to it. And when it comes to putting them into like physical volumes, I think they just take like a certain number of chapters and then just cut it off and then put the next set of chapters into the next volume. So sometimes you feel like a book ends in the middle of the story and then picks up and then ends and then another story begins within the same book. I don't know if that makes any sense. If it doesn't, it's confusing. So that's why it's confusing. But I still had a really good time. I actually gave this one 4 stars, so it's definitely been my favorite in the series so far, and I am very excited to go ahead and continue it based off what I just said about the structure of the stories and the way that they're being published. I'm definitely gonna try and maybe read one a month. I've been kind of putting like 2 or so months in between volumes, and that has caused me to be confused sometimes. So this is definitely a series that if you're a binge reader, this will work well for you. All right, our second to last book was another audiobook, and this is The Taking of Jack Livington by Orion Douglas. This is another YA horror story. In this book, we are following Jake, and he is the only African American other than his brother at his school. He also can see dead people. And when I say he can see dead people, it seems that some people, when they die, they kind of get stuck in their death cycle, which is just them reliving their death over and over again. So when he's walking around town, he will see that deadly car crash just happening again and again. The kid on the school football field that got impaled through the head with a javelin, he'll just see that scene over and over again. Obviously not a very pleasant thing that you want to see while strolling down the street. However, at the beginning of this school, there is a school shooting at another school, and Jake starts to realize that the shooter is haunting him and harassing him in hopes of weakening him so that he can possess him and will cause more mayhem. I ended up giving this story 3.5 stars. It was very hard for me to rate this book because I can't exactly put my finger on what I didn't love about it. This book creeped me out. We have the point of view of both Jake as well as the point of view and some journal entries from the shooter, and it is very disturbing to read from that boy's point of view. Surprise, surprise. So there were definitely things about the story that I absolutely loved. I think the creep factor was definitely there. I think the shooter was really well written. The way that the author wrote about him, you hated him, but you also hated the people and the events around him and what led to him shooting up the school. You just see how often he was failed by those who were in denial about the fact that he was very mentally ill. So sometimes you felt pity for him, and sometimes you just absolutely hated his gut and you're like, can you just die again, please? You're such a terrible person, and I'm so sorry that you went through everything, but like, honestly, at this point, you need to be gone forever. So I think that the story was really well written. I think it's an excellent concept, but there was just something about it where I couldn't fully connect to the story. And I don't know if it was the fact that it was somewhat random in nature, where the author even had the shooter talking to Jake saying, how does it feel to be part of something that you have nothing to do with? Because Jake and the shooter have zero connection. So sometimes when all of this is happening to Jake, it just, you're like, what's going on? What is it? Why is this happening to this poor guy? It's not like he moved into a haunted house. It's not like he and the shooter had any sort of personal connection or anything. So I think sometimes the story was just, it wasn't as rooted as I would like it to be, which I don't know if that makes sense, but I thought that the writing was well done and that the plot was good as well. I think just sometimes I found myself being like, why is this happening kind of situation. So 3.5 stars. I thought that the audiobook was well done for the most part. Sometimes the narrator's voice for certain people was a little odd. There was this female character and he made her sound like an 80-year-old smoker, even though she was a teenager. So that was a little weird. But otherwise, it was a really enjoyable, yet not enjoyable experience. And I would recommend giving it a try this spooky season, especially if you're looking for more Black horror. All right, and the final book that I finished so far is a much lighter book than the one I just talked about, and that is The Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. This is by Kimberly Lemming, and in this book we are following Cinnamon and her demon, and I don't remember the demon's name, so sorry. But anyway, Cinnamon is a human. She and her family own a spice farm, hence her name being Cinnamon, and they are part of a town or part of a kingdom that worships a specific goddess who protects them from demons. Every 15 years, a man and a woman is selected from their village to go defend the temple or one of the temples and to kill demons. Cinnamon is not selected for this, and that's great for her because she does not want that at all. However, on her way back from the festivities, she's tipsy, and one of the boys in town tries to mug her, but she ends up chasing him through the woods. And while she's running through the woods, she hears someone calling out for help. She then comes across our demon, though he doesn't look like a demon at this moment. So she pulls him out from the rubble because it looks like he kind of crash landed there. And he tells her to run. And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, I don't think it's very polite to like kill the person that just rescued you. And then he like turns into a demon and she's like, peace out. So the next day he shows up at their place and she's like, hey, mom and dad, remember how you thought it was being really weird and like a drunk loser last night and boarding up the house? Well, guess what? Here's the demon. And the demon's like, hey, I realized that using cinnamon causes your goddess's curse on me to be lifted. And everyone's like, what do you mean? What do you mean our goddess is cursed? Like, she's our rescuer. She's like our savior. She like keeps us safe and everything. And he's like, yeah, no. She's like a really old witch and she kind of puts a curse on us that makes us go crazy and then has you kill us. And they're like, oh, well, that sucks. And then he recruits Cinnamon to destroy the witches for temples so that she perishes and the demons are freed from this curse. So obviously this is kind of more a cozy-ish fantasy, even though there's a lot of death in it and there's also some pretty steamy scenes in it as well, but I would say it leans more towards cozy, and I had a great time with it. I ended up giving it a 4-star. I think it's a slightly lowish 4-star because I was like 3.5, 4 stars. I kind of went with a 4-star because it just was a really fun story. This is a story that'll make you laugh a lot. It'll make you smile a lot. I really loved Cinnamon. She was a really great, fun, sassy character. The demon was also sexy, which is what we want in a demon love interest. I thought that it had just enough plot to keep us interested and to kind of move us forward throughout the kingdom with a smidge of world building and whatnot. And yeah, overall, I think it was a fun time. I think it's a fun, quick audiobook. If you're into fantasy romances, then I suggest picking this one up. All right, so those are all the books that I've read so far. Let's take a look at what I'm currently working on and what I still need to get to. So starting with my current fiction read, I'm reading book 3 of The Warriors, a series by Erin Hunter, and I am pretty far through it, page 238, and I am having a great time with this. This is a reread for me, and I'm a little behind on my reread schedule for this, so if I happen to have time this month, maybe I'll read another one, because this story has got me hooked. Yesterday I was reading it and it almost made me cry, but obviously a book about cats where cats may die, I'm probably gonna cry because animal death is upsetting to me. Up next, I have my nonfiction book, which I'm super optimistic I'm gonna go ahead and finish this month. I really neglected it last month, but I have been making pretty good progress in it. I am on page 184. It's not about the burqa, and it is a collection of essays by different Muslim women. What I was previously doing was trying to read an essay in between each of my fiction reads. Like I said, I wasn't really doing that last month, but this month I kind of stepped up my game and started reading 2 essays in between my fiction reads, and I want to say I have maybe 3 or 4 left. So hopefully, or no, I know for a fact that I will finish it this month. I do have the Dawn chorus, or is it the chorus of the Dawn? I don't remember which way the title goes, but this is by Samantha Shannon. I am taking part in a read along by Bookstara. I will go ahead and post the hosts of that down below. I have that on my Kindle. I know my hold on it is running out today, but last time I got it right away, so fingers crossed that that is the case when I try to renew it. And then the final book that is on my actual TBR for my TBR game is The Women of Troy by Pat Barker. And yeah, I have to admit, I haven't like super been drawn to this book this month. Just because I'm getting out of a reading slump, so and historical fiction just isn't what I'm super in the mood for, but I did really enjoy her first book, The Silence of the Girls, so I'm sure once I get into it, I'll have a good time. As far as audiobooks go, I do have 2 audiobooks that are currently available to me, so I'll probably read those next. We have When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nevo. That one's only 2 hours long, so that should be pretty quick. And then we have Painted Devils by Margaret Owen, which is the second book to Little Thieves? Was that what it was called? Anyway, I really enjoyed the first book, and I kept forgetting that the second book already came out. So when I saw someone post about it on Instagram, I was like, let me put myself on hold for that now. And it is now available, so I will definitely be checking that out ASAP. Otherwise, audiobook wise, I probably focus more on thrillers and any other holds that are coming in. All right, guys, so those are all the books that I've read and all the ones that I'm still hoping to get to this month. Let me know down below how your month is going. What book is your favorite so far? And what books are you still hoping to get to? As always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!